Welcome to Tuesday Talks. We're here today at Mote Marine Laboratory's International Center for Coral Reef Research and Restoration in the Florida Keys. Today we are talking with Dr. Nowicki. He is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Shark and Ray Conservation Research Department at Mote. He has a very wide range of research experience, and today we're going to be talking to him about sharks. Are you ready to dive in?
There you go.
Can you tell us about your favorite shark?
Absolutely. So my favorite shark is the tiger shark. There are hundreds of shark species out there, but tiger sharks are my favorite. That's for a few different reasons. First of all, they're beautiful animals. They have these vertical bars along their body that fade as they get older and bigger, but especially when they're young, they're extremely pronounced and very, very pretty. I'm also most familiar with tiger sharks compared to all other species. I've worked with about 200 animals, gotten very close to them, so I feel like they're almost my friends. You know, I know a lot about them. I've gotten very close. Another reason I like them is because they're very important predators in our ecosystems. Most shark species are actually quite small. Tiger sharks can get over 13 feet in length, and they are generalists, which means they can eat almost anything that they encounter. So that means that they have a very important role as predators in their ecosystem because almost anything they encounter is potentially harmful.
Gotcha. Wow, so do you think that there are any tiger sharks in the Keys?
Oh, absolutely. We know that they're here. Tiger sharks live in tropical and subtropical oceans around the entire planet. So if it's warm enough for tiger sharks, it's likely that there are some nearby.
What is the most common shark in the Keys?
That question is harder to answer than you might think. So we have a lot of shark species that are common here in the Keys, but getting a true estimate of their population is really, really difficult. And one of the reasons for that is because the way that you fish for sharks influences the things that you're going to catch.
Okay.
So for example, if you're going for small species, you might be using a hook around this size, and you're not going to be catching a tiger shark or a white shark on something like this. You could catch a lemon shark on this, or a small bull shark, maybe a bonnet head, or a nurse shark on something like this. For larger animals, you're going to want bigger gear, and hooks like this can even be used for shark fishing. This came off of a tiger shark from Western Australia.
Oh, wow.
And if you want really large animals, you can even go up to larger hook sizes than this. But this is not going to catch a small lemon shark. This is not going to catch a bonnet head. So the gear that you use influences what animals you're going to find. Here, despite that, even if you're not fishing, there are still biases. So some people are now using drones to look for sharks to get a estimate of the number in an area. But it is extremely interesting. And lemon sharks are one of the species that this has been pioneered on in some office. One of the problems there is what happens if your shark is in deep water? What happens if the water is muddy? It doesn't work that well.
It doesn't.
So it's hard to get a complete answer, but I can say with confidence that lemon sharks and nurse sharks are probably the two most common species here. Bonnet heads are also very common.
So down in the Florida Keys, obviously saltwater. Are there any freshwater sharks?
There actually are. So of the hundreds of shark species that are around the world, a little under a half dozen of them can tolerate fresh water in different amounts. Probably the one people are most familiar with are bull sharks. Now, bull sharks are still saltwater shark species. They still need to go into saltwater for part of their life, but they can tolerate really low salinities all the way down to complete fresh water. And so you can find bull sharks that are very high upriver in certain areas as long as there aren't dams or locks, because they can survive those conditions. Now, it's expensive for them to do that. They have to change their body chemistry to be able to even survive there, but they are able to do it. And you can, in some cases, find bull sharks in fresh water. However, there are also true river sharks that can live their entire lives in fresh water or in just barely brackish water. Now, there's only a couple species of them. They're in a group called Glyphis, and they're only found in the Indo-Pacific. So if you're swimming in a lake in Arkansas, you don't have to worry. But even if you were in a place like the Ganges River where these sharks are around, they're extremely rare. And they're also very understudied in science. We know almost nothing about them, except that they're under extreme threat from people because of not only fishing in rivers, but also pollution. And the way we dam rivers up with locks and dams for either energy or water management, that keeps those animals from being able to move up and down river as they need to. So there are freshwater sharks, they do exist, but they're very rare, and there are actually freshwater stingrays as well.
Okay.
So
are those as rare as the freshwater sharks?
That is a good question. We know a little bit more about them than we do about the sharks, including the fact that some of them can get truly huge.
Wow.
So yeah, just because you're not in salt water doesn't mean that there might not be shark strays, in your neighborhood.
Do you you tag sharks for your research?
Yes, I do, and a lot of shark researchers around the world use tagging as one of their main tools to answer questions. There's a couple different kinds of tags that we use in our research. I have examples of two of them here today, but there are others as well. The easiest one is just a numbered or a identifying tag. This doesn't have any technology in it. It is implanted either in the fin or on the outside of the muscle with a little barb, and it usually just has a code, an ID code, and it has often a place to send that ID code, so a website or an organization, so that if a fisherman catches a shark that has a number on it, they can call up our researchers and say, hey, we found shark number 12345. It was caught in this location at this date, and that tells us things like where that shark may have moved to, the fact that it's still alive, if we're lucky, how much it's grown over that time period. So that's the simplest tag. Probably the next simplest tag is the acoustic tag. We have an example of that right here. So this acoustic tag is often implanted internally using surgery. So we'll cut a small place right here around where the belly button would be on a person, and we insert this tag into the abdominal cavity and then sew it back up. And what this does is it emits a high-frequency pinging sound at a unique combination of frequency and tempo, and that tells any listening stations we have underwater, we do have hundreds of them around Florida, that, hey, animal 12345 came within 600 feet of our listening station. About once a year, researchers will go to each listening station, pull it up, download the data and change the batteries, and then when we get back to the lab, we can say, hey, look, shark 12345 was here on April 11th and May 4th, and then July 27th. And then we can tell a lot about where the animals are moving because of that.
So how long do those tags last for?
Well, this depends. So this is what we call a B16, which is just the model type. And these acoustic tags could be very small, like really, really small, or they can be quite large. And the bigger they are, usually a higher, the further they can ping and the more battery life they have. These things can last for months to years, depending on exactly the settings you set it to.
Awesome, that's really cool.
Yeah. Two other tag types we have are these ones here. These are SPAT tags, also known as survivorship tags. So they look kind of funny.
Yeah, they do.
So a main difference between this kind of tag and this acoustic tag is that we never have to get this tag back to get the information from it.
Right.
The information is relayed to the receivers, and we pick those up.
Mm-hmm.
For these tags, these what are sometimes called pop-up archival tags, they stay on the animal. They're external, so they go into the muscle tissue with this little barb, and they hang off the side kind of like a big piece of jewelry. After a set amount of time, this tag will be recording depth or water temperature. In this case, it actually has an accelerometer in it too, just like your phone. So it can tell us whether the shark is swimming or whether it's gliding. Sometimes it can even tell us whether it's trying to feed or hunt. So it can give us a lot about what the day-to-day activities of the animal are. And after a certain amount of time, this actually breaks off the animal. It comes to the surface, and then this antenna relays to our satellite network all of the information that it had been collecting over the past couple weeks or months.
That's really cool.
We don't have to get this tag back. It gives all the information to the satellite beams it down to our computer, and then we get more information from there.
You have to check into the computer software to get it, or is it
yes.
Like a notification like, your tag's up?
Well, you need to essentially subscribe to the satellite network to get the satellite data you need. So, the tags themselves are expensive, but also having access to satellites is not a cheap thing.
Yes.
So these tags can be thousands of dollars each to deploy on one animal. So we really have to be very focused with our questions to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck.
Yes.
When we're asking questions with these more expensive tag types.
Right.
The last tag type we use is, I don't have an example of it here, is a satellite tag. And these are probably the ones that people are most familiar with. You see them on a lot of Discovery Channel specials. You see them, they're commonly used by OSearch organization. And these ones stay on the animal.
Okay.
And instead of popping up when they're done, they stay on the dorsal fin. And anytime that animal comes to the surface, that antenna starts relaying satellites its current location.
Okay.
So we can be tracking for years an animal that might never come near shore again. But we can tell where it is every time it comes to the surface, as long as we have satellites that can lock onto that signal.
That's really cool. Is it a saltwater trigger?
Yes.
Or that's the antenna part is the saltwater trigger?
Yes, exactly. So it's very expensive in terms of battery life for a tag to try and ping a satellite. And it's useless to do that underwater because water is really good at blocking signals. So the way that the satellite tag manufacturers get around that is they have a switch on the side of the satellite tag that can emits a tiny little current. And as long as there's salt water around both sides of that switch, it's going to keep itself turned off. As soon as it breaks the water surface, though, air is a poor conductor of electricity. All of a sudden, the voltage on those switches drops, and the satellite says, "We're in the air now. We need to start transmitting right now."
Yeah.
It'll try and reach the satellite, and if it can, it relays as much information as it can. If it goes back underwater, that connection is made again, and most of the tag turns itself back on.
That's really cool.
And that's why it can last for years.
Yeah, awesome. So if our viewers wanted to know one thing about sharks or how they could help them, what would you tell them?
I'm going to give you a buy one, get one free.
Okay.
Say two things. The first is to have conversations with people around you about sharks, about how they live their lives, because a lot of times people are afraid of things that they simply don't know. So, for example, in my mind, the scariest animal out there is the bear. I don't know that much about bears, but I do know that they can run faster than me, climb faster than me, and swim faster than me. I don't know much beyond that, but knowing that much is pretty scary.
Right.
The more that you learn about sharks, the less scary they get. The more you realize that they're just a predator living in their environment, just like a lion or a tiger or anything else. So having those conversations with other people who might know very little about sharks can help dispel the fear that came with Jaws and everything related to it. And we need that badly because sharks need conservation. As a consumer, especially if you eat seafood, one of the best things that you can do is download a seafood guide like the one that Monterey Bay Aquarium creates. And when you go to a restaurant or when you go to the grocery store, take a look at their guide. They have hundreds of different food fish on there that you can check to see whether it is sustainably fished or not. Does it catch a lot of sharks by accident? Does it put a lot of plastic in the water? Does it, is it a generally conservation-minded fishery, or is it a really destructive one? So by making those more sustainable choices, you're voting with your dollars. You're making sure that we value conservation practices in the fishing industry and making sure that animals like sharks and a lot of other species are going to be around for 100 years and the 100 years after that, et cetera, et cetera. So those are really impactful, real things that the average person can do to help shark conservation for very, very little investment. It's definitely worth it.
Well, Dr. Rob, that's it for today. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
I learned so much. I hope you guys learned so much. If you like this content, please like, share, comment, follow all of our social channels. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/PostdoctoralReefs.
And don't forget to keep looking in because we're going to have more content coming to you soon.